Good morning, good evening, friends. Welcome to my channel, Ek Kitab Se Ek Moti, which in English means a pearl or gem from one book. Today, I'm going to read a portion from a personal development or self-help classic. This book has influenced many, and one of the reasons it has had this positive influence on others is it has a very scientific method of self-improvement. One person who was a failure in his field was able to apply this to become an extraordinary person in his field. That is, he was able to rise to the top of his field. I'll mention his name towards the end of this video. So keep watching, and we'll talk about that person, how he or she was inspired by this book, which is the Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. Now, before I start reading the section that I've chosen for today, let's just briefly see who Benjamin Franklin was. So I've just opened Wikipedia, and I'll just read the first paragraph. Benjamin Franklin, he was born in 1706 and he died in 1790. Was an American polymath, that is, a writer, scientist, inventor, statesman, diplomat, printer, publisher, and political philosopher. Among the most influential intellectuals of his time, Franklin was one of the founding fathers of the United States, a drafter and signer of the Declaration of Independence, and the first Postmaster General. So he is considered one of the greatest minds of his time. He is considered one of the greatest Americans, the greatest intellectuals of his time. I think he also had some kind of a contribution. I mean, he made some contribution to electricity as well. So you can Google his name and find out how he contributed to the field of electricity. So now let me read this portion that I have selected. In the various enumerations of the moral virtues I had met with in my reading, I found the catalogue more or less numerous, as different writers included more or fewer ideas under the same name. Temperance, for example, was by some confined to eating and drinking, while by others it was extended to mean the moderating every other pleasure, appetite, inclination, or passion, bodily or mental, even to our avarice and ambition. Remember, this is slightly old-fashioned English, because he wrote in maybe 1790s or 1780s, because I think he wrote his autobiography when he was 79 years of age. So he's following a method of writing that must have been prevalent during his time. I propose to myself, for the sake of clearness, to use rather more names with fewer ideas annexed to each than a few names with more ideas. Now, I think he was influenced by the philosopher John Locke of the UK. So John Locke, I think, used to think that it's better to use more words with fewer ideas attached to them, instead of using fewer words and then attaching too many ideas to each word. So just to avoid confusion of mind. So more words, but with fewer ideas attached to them. So that improves clarity of thinking. I propose to myself, for the sake of clearness, to use rather more names with fewer ideas annexed to each than a few names with more ideas. And I included under 13 names of virtues all that at that time occurred to me as necessary or desirable, and annexed to each a short precept which fully expressed the extent I gave to its meaning. These names of virtues with their precepts were, now I'm not going to read the entire list. I mean, I'll just mention the virtues that he wanted to develop, but I won't read the precept that he has mentioned under those virtues. I'll just read one or two. So here are the 13 virtues that he wanted to develop. So you see this list here, and under each virtue he has added some maxim or precept or some kind of a moral statement, or a statement that clarifies what he means by this word. So similarly you see on this page as well. So there are listed 13 virtues. So let me mention the virtues, and for a few I'll mention the precepts as well. Temperance, that's the first virtue. Second virtue is silence. Third, order. Fourth, resolution. Fifth, frugality. Sixth, industry. Seventh, sincerity. Eighth, justice. Ninth, moderation. 10th, cleanliness. 11th, tranquility. 12th, chastity. 13th, humility. So I'll just read some of the precepts he has mentioned under these. Temperance. Eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. Silence. Speak not but what may benefit others or yourself. Avoid trifling conversation. I think it's trifling or trifling. Let's just check the pronunciation so that we don't mispronounce any word, or try to pronounce most of the words accurately. So it's trifling, I think.
Trifling.
Yeah, trifling. Then order. Let all your things have their places. Let each part of your business have its time. And then industry, that is hard work. Lose no time. Be always employed in something useful. Cut off all unnecessary actions. Tranquility. Be not disturbed at trifles or at accidents, common or unavoidable. Now, so the first thing he did was he listed 13 qualities or habits or skills that he wanted to acquire, and then now he's going to mention a method that has had a very positive influence on several people. So now let's see what method he adopted. So I'm skipping a few paragraphs so that we can move on to the part that's very important. So here is the method. So this is the table he kind of came up with, and then he listed the qualities here, and here he has the dates. So he used to allocate each week to develop one quality. Now let me first read out what he did and how he used this table, and then we'll have a brief discussion on this method. I made a little book in which I allotted a page for each of the virtues. So in his book, there was a page for each of the virtues. I ruled each page with red ink so as to have 7 columns, one for each day of the week, marking each column with a letter for the day, so SMT, so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and so on. I crossed these columns with 13 red lines. So he's making rows now. I crossed these columns with 13 red lines, marking the beginning of each line with the first letter of one of the virtues on which line and in its proper column I might mark by a little black spot every fault I found upon examination to have been committed respecting that virtue upon that day. I determined to give a week's strict attention to each of the virtues successively. Thus, in the first week, my great guard was to avoid the least offense against temperance, leaving the other virtues to their ordinary chance, only marking every evening the faults of the day. Thus, if in the first week I could keep my first line marked T, that is for temperance, first line is for temperance, or first row is for temperance, clear of spots. So, thus, if in the first week I could keep my first line marked T, clear of spots, I suppose the habit of that virtue so much strengthened, and its opposite weakened, that I might venture extending my attention to include the next, and for the following week keep both lines clear of spots. Proceeding thus to the last, I could go through a course complete in 13 weeks and 4 courses in a year. And like him who, having a garden to weed, does not attempt to eradicate all the bad herbs at once. Now herbs is the standard pronunciation is herbs and not herbs, so it's herbs. All the bad herbs at once, which would exceed his reach and his strength, but works on one of the beds at a time, and, having accomplished the first, proceeds to a second. So I should have, I hoped, the encouraging pleasure of seeing on my pages the progress I made in virtue, by clearing successively my lines of their spots, till in the end, by a number of courses, I should be happy in viewing a clean book after a 13 weeks daily examination. And now let me skip a few more paragraphs and just show you how he worked on his virtue of order. That's why it's so important to have some kind of timetable for the day. So you see this, his method of structuring his day and allocating certain portions of time for his daily activities. And now let me skip a few more paragraphs and let me read what he wanted to say about this method that he came up with, that he invented. He was an inventor, actually, inventor as well. It may be well my posterity, that is the generations to come, should be informed that to this little artifice, I think artifice is some kind of technique. I hope I'm right in pronouncing it that way, artifice. Let me just be sure. Let me check the pronunciation. It's artifice.
Artifice.
Yes. So the meaning is something contrived or made up to achieve an end, especially by deceiving. Now, in modern English, maybe it has some negative connotations, but it just means some technique. Yeah, I think there are 4 meanings given. So the 4th meaning is an artistic device or convention. Artifices such as conceits and puns. Well, no, I'm sorry. I think it's the 3rd meaning. Cleverness or ingenuity. Ingenuity. Let me just get that pronunciation right. Ingenuity. Ingenuity is the pronunciation. Ingenuity. So the meaning of artifice is cleverness or ingenuity in making or doing something, art or skill. So that's what he means. It's a technique. It may be well my posterity should be informed that to this little artifice, with the blessing of God, their ancestor owed the constant felicity of his life, down to his 79th year, in which this is written. What reverses may attend the remainder is in the hands of Providence, but if they arrive, the reflection on past happiness enjoyed ought to help his bearing them with more resignation. To temperance he ascribes his long-continued health, and what is still left to him of a good constitution, to industry and frugality, the early easiness of his circumstances and acquisition of his fortune, with all that knowledge that enabled him. He's referring to himself. The pronouns are referring to himself. With all that knowledge that enabled him to be a useful citizen, and obtained for him some degree of reputation among the learned, to sincerity and justice, the confidence of his country, and the honorable employs it conferred upon him, and to the joint influence of the whole mass of the virtues, even in the imperfect state he was able to acquire them, all that evenness of temper and that cheerfulness in conversation, which makes his company still sought for and agreeable even to his younger acquaintance. I hope, therefore, that some of my descendants, that is, the generations to come, I hope, therefore, that some of my descendants may follow the example and reap the benefit. So he's encouraging his future generations to follow his example and reap the benefit, as he reaped the benefits of this extraordinary method. So now let me just briefly discuss what he was trying to do using that table and listing out his virtues. Now remember, this was written in the 1780s or 1790s, I think 1780s. So the language is slightly old-fashioned, so it takes some effort to understand what he's trying to say, because some of the words are no longer used the way he's used them. So that's why we need to read a few books that have been written maybe 100 years ago or 200 years ago, so that we are able to appreciate the English that was used during those times, especially during the Victorian times. I mean, if you're interested in English literature, you can try to read some of the great books written during the Victorian period. For example, John Ruskin's Unto This Last. So that will show you how great a writer he was and how beautifully the English language can be handled and used. Now, let's look at the qualities that he wanted to develop. So, as I said, he first listed out 13 qualities. So, you can do the same. So, if you want to improve some kind of quality, some kind of habit, some kind of skill, you can follow this method. Any area, it can be related to your profession, it can be related to your personal life. So you list 13 things in which you want to improve, 13 areas in which you want to become better. And then what you do is you come up with this table. So what he did was he had a table for each quality. So you need to have a notebook in which you draw this table, but nowadays it's you can use an Excel sheet. So each sheet will have this table. Like in the Excel sheet, the worksheet, you have sheets, right? You have just like different tabs at the bottom you have, so you can have different sheets, or maybe you can have different files for each of these 13 attributes or skills or qualities that you want to develop. So you first come up with this table. So he has mentioned temperance. Let's say you want to develop your public speaking skills. 13 skills. So one can be your public speaking skills, then second skill or quality or attribute can be confidence, third could be concentration, fourth could be reading skills. You want to improve your reading habit, and then the other can be communication, then another can be positive thinking. I mean, I'm just thinking of certain things that I have plans to improve in certain areas in which I want to improve myself, but you can come up with your own. So now let's look at the table here. So at the top, you'll mention the quality that you want to improve, and then a little bit of information about what that is. So for example, if you say, I want to improve myself in public speaking, you can mention something related to that. So you can say, speak without hesitation in front of a crowd, something like that. So you know what this skill actually means, so that there is some descriptive words here, some words to describe what exactly you mean by that skill or attribute or quality that you want to acquire. So you mentioned at the top the quality or skill that you want to acquire. Here you just briefly describe it, and then you draw these rows and columns. So let me just see here. So the first column will list out all the 13 qualities. Now he has used just the first letter. That's okay. You can, in an Excel sheet, you can mention the entire thing because it was a time of manual, drawing up of these tables, right? So maybe just to save time, he used the first letter. So temperance, T is for temperance, then what? S is for silence. Then the next is O, order, and so on. So these are just the 13 qualities or attributes you have to list. So please focus, just pay some attention here. Let's try to understand this. So at the top, you mentioned the first quality that you want to acquire, and here all the 13 qualities that you have planned to acquire in the year or so to come. And then you have these columns for each day of the week. So he begins with Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and so on. Now, the first week, your entire focus will be on the first quality, the quality at the top. So here T is at the top. So your focus will be on the first row. Your focus will be to keep this clear of all spots. I mean, your attempt will be that, but in case you fail, you mark a dot here. So if you fail once in this quality, for example, you had an opportunity to speak in public and you failed miserably, then you put a dot here. Maybe then you tried to speak again on Monday, then you, if you didn't fail, if you did well, then you don't put a dot here. So the dots are the negative things, or they show that you failed in the application of that quality or in the acquiring of that skill. Failed in a sense, you didn't do well. So you are noting down your mistakes or faults in that area. Then that's the first week. Then the second week, you go to your next sheet on the next page, or if you're using an Excel sheet, then you go to the next sheet. So here at the top, you'll mention the second quality that you want to focus on. So second week, second quality. First week, it was let's say public speaking. Second week, let's say you want to develop your confidence. So now you can keep the table this way, but you just change this thing. So the first week will still remain for that. So you have already focused on the first week. Now your focus will be on the second week. So you'll try to keep this second row clear of all spots, and also the first will be also clear, I think, if you really focused on that the first week. But that's fine. Your focus the second week is on acquiring the second skill or quality, so you'll not worry about the others, not neither the first one nor the ones that are to follow. This way you are kind of giving one full week's attention to just one attribute or skill that you want to acquire. And by following this method, you will be doing more in a year, doing more in a week than you would be able to do in a year. That's what Benjamin Franklin says. That's what many who have put this into practice have said in their books. So, and then the third week, again, you'll have another table. At the top, you'll mention the third quality or skill you want to acquire, and then you'll focus on the third row, and others you'll leave them to ordinary chance. I mean, it's not that you'll completely let go of those other qualities, but your focus will just be on one skill each week. So at the end of 13 weeks, you will have come to this thing, the last row. And so you follow this process for 13 weeks, and then 14th week, you come back to the first one. So the next time you come back to this, you'll see that you'll have a very few black dots here. Maybe the first week you had many dots. The second time you repeat this process during the second kind of cycle, or the second course. So you'll have 4 courses or 4 cycles a year, right? Because 13 weeks into 4 is 52. And you have 52 weeks in a year. That's why he came up with 13. There is a reason why you come up with 13 qualities, or attributes or skills, because 13 into 4 is 1 year. So in order to give 1 year to each of these qualities, in order to give 4 weeks of attention to each of these qualities, you need to come up with 13 qualities. So it's better to just follow this method as Benjamin Franklin devised it. So you give 4 weeks attention to each quality, and at the end of the year, people will start noticing a great great improvements in all of these areas, and may start commenting upon the way you have been improving yourself. So just put this into practice. Let me just summarize. So Benjamin Franklin, the great inventor, the great polymath in a sense, someone who is learned in several different areas, and the great statesman, the founding father of the United States, considered one of the greatest men of his time, and one of the greatest minds that America has ever produced, came up with this great idea of listing 13 skills or qualities that he wanted to acquire, that he wanted to become good at. And then he came up with this table. He wrote down at the top the first quality that he wanted to focus on. So for example, he chose temperance. So the first week, his idea was to focus on temperance alone. So he came up with all these rows and columns. So the rows were the 13 qualities that he wanted to acquire, and the columns were the days. So the first week, his focus was just on the first quality or skill or attribute, and to keep those rows free of black spots. And the second week, his focus was on the second quality or skill that he wanted to acquire, and his focus was just to keep that row free of black spots, and the others he just left them to ordinary chance. It's not that he completely neglected them, but he focused on only one quality or attribute a week. And then he repeated this process for each of the 13 attributes or skills that he wanted to acquire. And at the end of the 13-week period, he came back to the first quality. So he started repeating that process now. So he repeated the same process for the next 13 weeks, and then at the end of the second 13-week period, he repeated the process. So he now came to the third 13-week period. So he again went back to the first quality and followed the same process until he came to the end of that table, and he focused on the 13th quality. And then so 3 weeks, then fourth week again he went back to the first quality and he repeated the process. And in a year he spent 4 weeks. I mean, he paid strict attention to a quality for 4 weeks. So this way he thought, and he saw that he witnessed the benefit of it. He saw that he was able to master these skills as no other method would have helped him do that. And then at the end of this portion that I read, he also says that some of his descendants, some of the future generations of his, would follow this method and reap the benefit. So why don't you also try putting this into practice? Now, I promised something at the beginning of the video, that there was a person who applied this to his life and he became a success in his field, a successful person in his field. So his name is Frank Bedger. Some people also pronounce it as Bedger, but I've heard many people from the US pronounce it as Bedger. So Frank Bedger wrote this, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. Now I'm going to make one of my videos on his book as well. And at the end of the book, he has this chapter, Benjamin Franklin's Secret of Success and What It Did for Me. So it's the same success principle, the same table, but he applied it to his sales attributes or skills. So instead of what Benjamin Franklin had, he just customized it and made it suitable for his own field or profession. So why don't you also do that? Whatever your job is, whatever your business is, in whatever field you are established, or you want to become successful in whatever field, you just try to list 13 things that you need to be good at in order to do well in your field. So I'll just read what he has to say about these things. So here is my list and the order in which I use them. First is enthusiasm, second is order, self-organization, third is think in terms of others' interests. So he's customized that thing. Fourth is questions, fifth, key issue, sixth is silence, listen. Some of these things he retained, the things that Benjamin Franklin listed. So some of the things he has kept them as it is. So silence, sincerity, that's the same thing. Knowledge of my business, that's different. Appreciation and praise, smile, happiness, remember names and faces. So all the skills that a salesman should possess, he has listed them. Remember names and faces. 12th, service and prospecting. 13, closing the sale action. So why don't you also put this great idea into practice as Frank Bedger did? So I hope you like this video. Thanks for watching.